Hello and welcome to day 23 of the 30 Days of Spectre on this fine Monday morning. Today, we are going to be discussing the leaked scripts of Spectre. And not only do we have myself, Mr. Tom Sears, I'm joined by my good friend, Mr. Chris Wright. Say hello, Chris.
Hello.
We are also joined by a third esteemed guest on today's episode, which is, all the way from Station C, Canada, good old Linda Zoo. Now,
she's not that old, Tom.
I suppose she's not, is she? She's very youthful, but you know what I'm saying. But yes, Linda was one of those crazy people that actually read the script before she watched the film, which for me, that was never going to happen. I was never going to touch that script, and obviously read it afterwards. But yeah, interesting choice, and we will be talking to her about that choice in today's conversation. So how are you today, Chris?
I'm all right. I'm looking forward to chatting about the scripts. I didn't get a chance to read both of them, but because there were two, wasn't there? There was one, I think, October and one December, which obviously we'll talk about with Linda shortly. But yeah, it'll be good.
Absolutely.
Good to compare it to the finished article.
Absolutely. So there's been all sorts of stuff that came out in that Sony hack. Which emails between executives discussing the script, and everything from Blofeld being an American female CIA agent to God knows what else. There was some madness going on for a while there, and it's all very intriguing, and we're going to explore it all in today's episode.
I would say anyone that reads the script before the film is madness as well. It is interesting, isn't it? Because I'm sure some people think, well, this will never happen again. This is the only opportunity. But I just couldn't do it,
I couldn't do it either.
You know how I am with like trailers,
yeah.
let alone an actual script.
Yeah.
Like imagine if you're sleeping one day, you woke up, and on the pillow next to you was a brand new Bond script. Like
I couldn't do it. Do you know what?
Yeah.
It wouldn't even be a temptation. I would look at it and be like, ooh, I'd be intrigued to know what angles they're going for and stuff, and but I don't want to know. And it would. Do you know what would be? I wouldn't even be tempted.
Do you know what would have been the worst thing in that situation? If you just thought, well, I'll just have a look at the back page. Let's just see how it finishes.
Yeah.
And then you'll be
Lord.
like, that would be, that would have been crazy.
Absolutely. And we will talk more at length about why that is in this episode. Now, one thing we will say is we have had some messages from people saying, oh, send us the leaked script. That's something we don't really want to get involved with, because it's one thing to like have read it and discuss it. Distributing it amongst people is a whole different ballgame. So it's obviously a bit of a tender subject in terms of how these scripts were obtained and stuff. Obviously Sony was hacked and they didn't want this information out there. So now the film's out there and done, I feel like it's fair game for us to sort of discuss the process a little bit and talk about that. But we won't be sort of forwarding it on to anybody. No. Because that's a bit rough, isn't it? Yeah.
And I don't think Eon would be too happy if that was the case either.
Absolutely.
So it's a bit of a shame, but yeah.
So before we get cracking with Linda, make sure you come and join us on the social medias. Come to facebook.com, put James Bond Radio into the search and you'll find us. Come and join the community over there because it's banging every day. Lots of good discussion to be had. Come and follow us on Twitter, which is @JamesBondRadio. Come over to YouTube and subscribe to our channel where we post things other than our podcast. We post our location tour videos and stuff like that. Sometimes Chris posts his interpretive dance videos, which you can see a little bit of now if you're watching on YouTube. Yes, that's always very entertaining. And then obviously you can come over to jamesbondradio.com and leave us a voicemail. Don't forget to leave us your 90-second Spectre review, because that's we're going to use that on all of the 90-second reviews we get on a future episode. Obviously, you only get 90 seconds to leave a voicemail through the system you use, so make sure it's you get in there within the time limit, and we'll put that on an upcoming episode. So let us know, good, bad, or in the middle, what you think about Spectre. And of course, last but not least, if you wouldn't mind coming to our iTunes page and leaving us a lovely glowing 5-star review, because it helps us rank higher in the searches and attract more listeners.
It does indeed.
Very nice. So should we get cracking with Linda today then?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get a bit of Station C on the go.
Let's do it. Okay, please welcome to James Bond Radio, all the way over from Station C. We have Linda Zoo. Hello, Linda. How you doing?
Hi guys. How are you guys doing?
Very well, thank you.
Not bad, Linda. Good to have you on board again.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. We got a lot to talk about today.
Absolutely, good stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So we're talking all about the leaked scripts. So you were obviously in the know when it all went down with Sony. You obviously had a mole in there somewhere who sent you the leaked scripts, because I remember you were one of those that had read it like a while ago when that first happened. You read the scripts, didn't you?
It came out. I think they came out around the New Year. Around the New Year, that's when all the leaks went down.
Yeah.
And I knew, knowing that the Spectre scripts were in there, I said to myself, I gotta see these. It's it's not every day that you're gonna get to see the script of a Bond movie before that Bond movie comes out, right?
Yeah.
So I knew I was basically gonna spoil the whole movie for myself, but I thought I gotta see this.
Interesting.
I gotta know what's going on behind the scenes. And they were interesting.
And how do you feel now, having seen the film, but obviously reading the scripts beforehand? Do you wish that you'd waited, or are you still happy to have read the scripts beforehand?
I'm glad I read the scripts beforehand, because I think there are certain things that might not have made sense to me if I'd just seen the film blind. I still enjoyed it a lot. It didn't really spoil too many of the surprises for me, especially in the third act. Yeah. That's where a lot of the new stuff comes in. So I don't actually think it really dampened my experience of the film. But there is something to be said about, experiencing a plot twist for the first time, in the theater.
Yeah.
That's an experience that you can't get once you've read these scripts, right? So
yeah.
But I think it was interesting, and it was it gave me a lot to think about, thinking about how Eon plans these movies out. It's really interesting.
That is interesting. I've just finished reading the December one. The two that were kind of passed on to us were the October draft and then the December draft. And from what I can tell, like the first 2/3 of the movie are more or less the same. There are some differences in there, but then it's that final kind of the third act of the movie where the drastic changes tend to come in. And it is interesting to see, because like some of the choices they made in those earlier drafts are like, okay, really like chin scratching of like, why would they do that? And then there's plenty in there that I've thought to myself, I'm so glad they didn't do that. And then there's a few things in there where I'm like, I think that would have been a little bit better if they had have stuck with that version. But yeah, it's interesting. So should we go through it bit by bit then? And should we look at the comparison between the finished movie and then these leaked ones?
Yeah, let's do it. I think I just want to add the script that we're referring to. One of them is, like you said, from October, so it's from mid-October of 2014, I guess.
Yeah.
And then the most recent one is from December 1st, so that's about 3 days before the actual title.
Wow. Okay.
That one would have been that's probably closest to the actual shooting script anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool stuff. So, shall we start at the beginning then? The old pre-title sequence. Now, as far as I can tell from reading the scripts, that's kind of more or less there, isn't it? Like that's what we see on the page is more or less what we see on the screen with a few minor differences. What are your thoughts on the pre-title sequence then?
I think one of the interesting things is that in both of the scripts, it says that it opens from the gun barrel into the let me see here, the eye socket of a skull.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. Like there's no mention of the dead are alive kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that must have been a choice in either post or it occurred to them as they were filming. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that would have been a cool kind of transition to go from the circle into the eye of a skull.
Yeah, well, we said that, didn't we, Chris? Like that, because when we were like being like, please let the gun barrel be at the beginning, and then what we were talking about was having like the circle go off, wobbles down after he gets shot into the corner, and then that usually changes into whatever the scene is, and then it opens out, and that's what it says in the script, isn't it? That's basically the idea, locking onto the skull. Which I remember, Chris, when we were speculating, you were saying, wouldn't it be cool if it opens out onto this massive skull and then it's in the Day of the Dead? So it was exactly that. They were thinking along the same lines as you.
Yeah. Do you have any preference, Linda, over whether you prefer the Dead or Alive or whether it had opened out to the skull? Or do you think either would have worked?
It's hard to say. I think going with the more traditional opening would have been cool, just because that's the way it's usually done. But there's something about, I know you guys talked about this, when they do the Dead are Alive, there's that boom, boom, like that's so dramatic, and it really gets you into the atmosphere of that opening sequence.
Yeah.
So I think they're both pretty effective. I don't really mind.
And I guess that line kind of links into Blofeld as well, doesn't it? Which is quite handy, and I guess we wouldn't have got that if it had gone straight into the skull. Yeah,
absolutely. Good. So what about the pre-titles itself then, Linda? Is there any kind of like key differences that you spotted from what we actually got in the final one? Any interesting little tidbits in there?
Doesn't seem like, for most part, it's mostly the same. I think there's more dialogue in these original scripts than there was in the movie.
Yeah.
In the movie, it's I think Bond says 2 lines, Estrella says 1 line. We hear a bit of Italian through the window. Yeah. That's about it. It's almost like a silent film.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the script, there's a lot more dialogue. There's a little bit of interplay between Estrella and Bond. And for the most part, it's the same. I think some of the details are different. Instead of blowing up a stadium, Sciarra is talking about assassinating a governor.
Yeah,
that's true.
There's also the part at the end, isn't there, when he's basically stolen the ring off of Sciarra and he's got control of the helicopter and he's flying off into the distance, where Estrella actually phones him up, doesn't she?
Yeah.
She's like, "Are you enjoying the view, James?" And he's like, it says some little quip and that's it. And there's a little bit more flirtation between the two of them in terms of dialogue and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it needed any more dialogue, or do you think that, like you say, the silent film version where it's just all balls out action? Because there was a bit as well where Bond's fighting Sciarra in the helicopter, and he does almost one of those "Who does number 2 work for?" moments, doesn't he? In one of the scripts, where he's like, he's like, "Are you working for?" No, "Who's the Pale King?" That's what he says to him in the thing. And I was like, "Oh, I'm glad they didn't do that, because that's a little bit rubbish, if you ask me." But yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I think what they went for in the final cut is good.
Yeah,
not too much dialogue. Just let the focus be on the action and on the Day of the Dead.
Absolutely, good. Yeah, good move.
There was a potential slightly different death for Marco Sciarra as well. Bond was basically going to kick him out the helicopter, as he does.
Yeah.
But he was meant to go through like the rotor blade, which was might have been a little bit Die Another Day, with going back into the jet, Gustav Grave type thing. So I really actually like the impact of the way that he just kicked him, and all you heard was like a poof, and he was gone, and that was it. And I think that was actually, A, it was quite realistic, and B, I think it sort of hit home a bit more. If it had been the whole rotor blade thing, it might have been a bit cheesy, maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, a bit too exaggerated. And I think what they ended up doing, I don't know if that's a reference to License to Kill. When he throws that one guy that works for Sanchez at the float plane. I don't know.
Yeah,
interesting.
Similar. Similar, definitely.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things as well is that you actually get a description of the title sequence, don't you? After this, which is kind of, as far as I've understood, you don't usually get that in a script. It's just kind of left to whoever's designing it to kind of come up with their ideas. But there's like all those key descriptions of seeing, the past villains. But in the script, the reference to Quantum is strawberry fields covered in oil, isn't it? That's what the key mention today is.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I guess this was what Purvis and Wade and John Logan thought the title sequence should be. So it's interesting to see that, and then see what Danny Kleinman took and decided to make with it. Obviously, Kleinman decided there should be a lot more Spectre imagery, whereas Purvis and Wade probably just wanted an almost Honor Majesty Secret Service-like title. Where it's just flashbacks of old scenes.
Yeah.
That's right. I think there was a part where there was going to be some octopus tentacles, but they were going to turn into Bond's veins, like blood, and then there was going to be a Union Jack, which then sort of draped around a bulldog, like the porcelain bulldog. So I think that was something. But that really struck me, because I just assumed in any script they'd just write titles and then leave it blank and then carry on. So it is interesting that they put their own ideas in there. Yeah, for sure.
And I think what it shows is that from the beginning, they were probably thinking about making this movie connected with all the other movies.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it definitely shows that they had that idea in mind.
Cool stuff. Yeah. So then ending up on next section being M's office in that sequence. I remember in the October draft there were some things that made me really go, oh, when I read them. One of them being is one of Bond's quips to M is something about like, you should think twice before being alone in a room with me or something. And he's like really like threatening M almost. And I think even M says like, is that a threat, 007? And I was just like, damn, man, Bond wouldn't be that, rude to M at the end of the day.
Yeah.
What did you think about that scene then and the differences we got?
Yeah, I agree with you, Tom. It in the October script, it makes him sound a little bit like he sounds whiny, like a little boy.
Yeah.
We know Bond is a rebel and he does his own thing, but like we don't want to hear him be that petulant.
Yeah.
So I think I'm glad that they cut it down to what it ended up being.
Yeah.
So in the movie, they cut straight from Sam Mendes' name to the newspaper hitting the desk, right?
Yeah.
In both of the scripts, it opens on Bond sort of walking across Whitehall into the building. Then he sees cameras everywhere. But obviously they didn't have that kind of shot. So I think that could have been interesting. It would have established the whole kind of surveillance plan a little more.
Yeah.
But I can see why they cut it because it's kind of a pointless shot.
You know what? There's actually, sorry, Chris. There's that little shot in the trailer of him walking through the office, of Bond walking through the office, isn't it? And I'm just thinking, was that actually used in the finished film? I don't think it was.
I don't recall seeing it.
Because it's basically him walking through Whitehall, walking past lots of typing secretaries, I think it said, who all type a bit faster when Bond walks past because they're all like, they all know he's in trouble. And then he passes Moneypenny on his way into CM and she gives him a bit of a cold shoulder and then he goes in. So I guess that they must have shot that. I would have thought that would be that sequence that we see in the trailer that we didn't actually see in the film. I'm pretty sure we don't see that sequence. I don't know whether I've just completely forgotten it.
I've seen it. I don't know how many times you guys have seen it, but I've seen it 3 times, and I don't remember seeing that scene. I'll have to go back and take a look at the trailer, see if he's wearing the same clothes or something.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think that's probably what that was.
Cool.
I know, Tom, you were saying that you really wanted a Bond Moneypenny scene, and obviously we had that in the script, but I think if we had the one that was written down in these scripts, you would have been a bit disappointed because literally all Bond did was basically walk through and she kind of blanked him or just sort of gave him a bit of a glare, almost like he's a naughty schoolboy, and there was nothing beyond that. So I think cutting straight to M and the newspapers is definitely the right move.
Yeah, absolutely.
From what we've seen.
No, I agree with that totally. So what about the kind of M scene itself? What do you think about the finished article versus what you see in the leak scripts?
I think it's good. They cut out a lot of extraneous dialogue, I think.
Yeah.
And what we end up getting in the film is just it's pretty straightforward. We get the idea, Bond's run off and done something, and M's just pissed.
Yeah.
He's angry, and but at the same time, from that line at the very end where M says, he says, "Whatever you're doing, stop that." You know? We still get the sense he's angry, but he still cares.
Yeah.
Yeah. And while the scripts have that same feeling, it's like they did it with 10 more lines of dialogue. So I think what they ended up cutting it was.
Yeah, I think that's an important part. I think we said that, didn't we, Chris? Is like that thing where Bond's about to leave and he's like, whatever you're up to has to stop. Almost gives the impression that M knows Bond wouldn't just be that reckless without it there being a good reason for it. But obviously he can't let him get away with it at the same time. So I think that's an interesting balance. So what about the Q scene after that? What do we see there?
So now I got a few interesting notes here. In the October script, there's a description. Well, in both scripts, there's a description of Q's lab.
Yeah.
And in the October script, I don't know if you guys noticed, it says Q's lab is a large Zen-like room with white tile walls.
Huh.
And then, which is obviously nothing like what we see in the film. But then in the December script, they've changed it to now it's a Zen room, but with damp brick walls, which is a lot closer to what we see in the film. I don't know what you guys think. I wonder why they changed it from like a bright white room, almost like what Blofeld has, to what we get in the film. Why do you guys think they changed it like that?
Well, maybe that, so it's not too similar to the Blofeld torture scene. And also, if they had to move somewhere quick, because obviously MI, sort of encroaching in on their territory, the likelihood is the place they'd find would be this sort of damp sort of place, underground place where they can just quickly set up rather than finding this all shining, all singing and dancing place where we could go. So I think, again, that was probably the right move, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited to see like a proper QLab next time. One that he's been in for a while. It's all set up and fully oiled and ready to go, man. I'm excited for that next time. So where do we go after that then? So I suppose we head to Rome with the Lucia Sciarra funeral and all that kind of business.
So in the October script, I think the most interesting thing is there's no mention of Oberhauser or whatever you want to call him being at the funeral, and obviously in the movie we see him kind of the side of his face. Which I like that they put that in there. It makes his character seem a little more menacing. The fact that he's at this funeral and kind of we don't know if he knows Bond is there or just suspects it, but it gives them that air of mystery. I like that they added that.
Absolutely. I suppose one thing that we should mention as well is the actual character of Blofeld / Oberhauser in these scripts went on a bit of a journey, didn't they? In terms of it feels like they weren't really clear on what they were doing. So if I remember right, in the October script, he's known as Heinrich Stockman, isn't he?
Yeah.
That was the actual one to go with, or if that's just a fake name that they put there so the Blofeld thing wouldn't be leaked out.
That's a good.
Either
thought,
way,
actually.
it was still the character made a lot of changes. I don't know if you guys know this, but if you read some of the emails that got leaked in the Sony hacks, there was a lot of discussion between the executives about whether or not to make him a woman, whether or not to make him a couple other things. Like it was quite interesting.
And
they ended up going with a more traditional take on the character, I guess. But it would have been cool to see him as a woman or something.
That was interesting. All those leaked emails and stuff. They were talking about like she was going to be a CIA agent or something that turns on him, and like Tanner was going to be a double agent that was evil, and all this crazy stuff. And what's really interesting about that is we all think usually, don't we? It's like Purvis and Wade, they either wrote a good movie or a bad movie. Do you know what I mean? But seeing how involved, it's almost like a Bond film by committee in a sense, isn't it? Like with all of these kind of fingers in the pie. And it's like, I wonder what the balance is with them actually sitting down to write a script. How much of that is actually them and how much is people saying, right, no, this is what you should do. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Like that whole idea of Tanner being a traitor is obviously in the books he's a bit of a bigger character, but in the movies he's a really minor character that I don't think audiences would really, assuming they're just casual fans of these movies. Like they might not even register who that is, and to think they'd just pin a huge plot changing turn on Tanner is.
It's almost like they thought about every single character and thought how could they make that character like almost the main part of the film. Oh, let's give him like he's the mole. No, she's the mole. No, he's the mole. Oh, let's make Blofeld an African warlord and all this sort of stuff. It's some of the potential choices were right out of left field, really, weren't they?
What do you think? Do you think the finished, more traditional Blofeld was the right way to go, or do you think we should have had a big shake-up and have him as a woman or a completely different style character? What do you think?
Well, what I would have preferred would be just screw this Oberhauser crap and just start out with Blofeld. Don't make any pretense and just from the beginning tell us, Blofeld's going to be in this movie. I would have preferred that. But if they had to go with, some kind of Blofeld reveal, I think to make him a woman would have been interesting. I know a lot of people. I think you, Chris, said, "What if it was Monica Bellucci?" That would have been a pretty interesting idea. But it'd be it would be a bit harder to pull off just because it hasn't been done before. But I would have preferred just if at the press conference they've been like, Blofeld's going to be in this movie.
Absolutely. I think that's probably what a lot of people's kind of gripe is and feelings with that totally. So with the whole kind of Rome sequence with obviously with the funeral, the whole Lucia Sciarra, Bond saving it from the assassins, as far as I can remember, that's more or less the same, isn't it? Or is there any key differences in there?
More or less, I think. Yeah. I don't think any.
Cool stuff. So moving on from there, then we've got the Austria scenes with Madeline meeting Madeline. I forgot to mention. I don't know if you guys talked about this already, but in the scripts we get 009's name. Oh yeah. Do you want to reveal what it is for the people?
It's nothing groundbreaking, but it's Eric Bryce.
Eric Bryce. There you go.
I wonder if that's 009.
I wonder if there's a little nod to Ivor Bryce from the
maybe
Flames, mate.
Yeah.
Good shout.
Yeah.
Be cool if he's if we see. I want to see another 00. We want to see 009 or something like that. I want to see a female 00 though. That's what I want to see.
Cool. What I found interesting was in the movie when Bond hits atmosphere, they start playing New York, New York. I think.
Yeah.
So does that mean that is that supposed to be a clue as to where 009 was going? Was he going to New York? Or is that
maybe.
just a joke? I don't know if that was just a joke.
Initially, it was going to be a different one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the script. It's Dusty Springfield.
Yeah.
Spooky. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's an interesting song choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I suppose Cubby was really good friends with Frank Sinatra, and obviously Nancy sung "You Only Live Twice," so maybe they were just playing that link a bit more. I'm not sure, but yeah, could have been. He's in New York, you never know.
Absolutely. So, how about the Austria sequences then? What interesting differences have we got in there?
Okay. Well, one thing I thought was really interesting is when Bond sees Mr. White for the first time. The first thing he says is "Time to come out," which I thought was which would have been a really cool callback to Quantum of Solace.
Yeah.
I think he says "Time to get out," but it's basically the same line. I think that's cool. I don't know why they got rid of that. I feel like of the 3 Craig movies, Quantum was the one that didn't get referenced as much.
Yeah.
And to the point where it seems almost, on purpose. But yeah.
I felt that as well.
Yeah. A lot about Mr. White when they're talking. Mr. White talks about his time in the French Foreign Legion quite a bit, and that's supposed to be that's how he knows L'Americain, because he spent time in Morocco as part of the Legion, and also that's how he meets Oberhauser, because they're both, for some reason, in the Legion.
Isn't there a Legionnaire group called the something of Spectre, or the Spectre of something?
Yeah.
Or other?
Yeah, and we're supposed to, I guess, infer that that's how the Spectre idea comes about. I think that's all. I actually wish they'd put that in, because I think that's quite interesting backstory.
That's what I thought as well. There's that little speech he gives about how Blofeld was like the weak one, and he was the smaller than everybody else, but he was smarter than everybody else. And the reason, like, wasn't it that their whole kind of like regiment was killed or something in some sort of battle, and that he needed Mr. White to like carry them to safety or something like that. And there was just this whole French Foreign Legion sort of backstory. And I thought I like that. That was one of the angles that I thought, that's kind of interesting. It would have been nice to hear a bit more of that, I think. And I think that sounds like a decent story to kind of throw in.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of the speech that Robert Shaw makes in Jaws. It's this kind of unrelated anecdote, but it tells you so much about the character and about the people that he's talking about.
Yeah.
I thought that would have been cool to have in the movie, but I guess for either time reasons or for relevance reasons, they cut it out.
Absolutely. I suppose one thing that we have that's really different about Blofeld this time is he's not Belgian anymore, is he, at the end of the day? If he had, if he's Austrian, I guess, then we've got a proper different backstory for Blofeld this time.
Yeah. Well, we don't know. So Blofeld is his mother's name, so we don't know what his mother.
That's a good
his
point.
mother could have been Belgian. I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah, we're supposed to take it that he's Austrian.
Absolutely.
So, wasn't there somewhere where we heard that Blofeld maybe was adopted as well? So Hans Oberhauser might have been his adoptive father, not his actual father. I'm sure that was.
Yeah. I think in one of the scripts he says, you were adopted too, or something, which makes it sound like Hans Oberhauser is just this random guy who goes around adopting children. But but that would have been interesting. So if they'd gone with that perspective, it kind of dampens the whole, my father likes you better kind of. Because if they were both adopted, it wouldn't be as big a deal.
Yeah, well, that was the weird thing. I think that's the December script, if I remember right. Because if I'm right, in the December script, Blofeld isn't even a thing in the December script. Like, he's always referred to as Oberhauser, and then there's that scene where they're talking about their past, and Bond says, I do remember you. You told me you were Hans's only natural son, but you were adopted too, and your parents were Romanian diplomats that were caught helping the Germans during the war and were tortured to death. And his real name was Ernest Serban.
Yeah. Which, again, I'm not sure if they would have gone with that name because that name that just sounds too similar to Blofeld's real name to me.
Yeah.
So that could have been a placeholder name.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I hadn't thought of that. I took that to mean that at some point in the development process, they were like, maybe let's just not have Blofeld as the head and have Christoph as somebody else entirely. But that is a good point. I imagine, considering the script was leaked as well, that maybe that was just a little double blind kind of styly thing.
Yeah.
So moving on to Tangiers then. What have we got going on there? Any interesting little nuggets over there?
One thing we missed was in the December script. I think Madeline has one line. So this is when she and Bond and Q are in the hotel room, in the Hotel Pevsner, I guess. And Madeline has the line, he was second in command for more than 20 years, which we don't get in the movie. But basically that line that basically establishes that Mr. White was, after Blofeld, it would have been Mr. White.
Yeah, number two.
And I'm wondering why I'm interested why they cut that out of the movie. In the movie, I think she just says he was part of Spectre, but
yeah, do you know what? There's a lot of stuff in these leaked scripts that do provide some cool backstory, and they do link together the previous films in a lot smoother way than what we actually got. A lot of people are complaining about how, how would Silver have been linked? That feels a bit shoehorned in. But there's a line later on in one of the scripts where Blofeld basically, he's standing in the burnt out wreckage of the MI6 building, and he talks about how he bankrolled Silver's whole plan, to get the hard drive with all the MI6 agents on it and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like that was all you needed. It was just that one line, and that ties it in perfectly. And to take that out, I feel makes Skyfall and the link there a little bit more awkward for people, I think.
Yeah, once you take all that dialogue out, it's the audience has to do a lot more of the connection.
Yeah.
And not everyone's as big a Bond fan as we are. So for a lot of people, that's not going to come naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but one of the things I thought was interesting, and you and I have spoken about this before, Chris, is that whole in the train fight in Tangiers, we were saying how we should have seen Hinks try to do the thumb thing again and get his little thumb daggers out, and that would have established it more of like his special move kind of thing. And in the scripts, it does do that. It literally says it refers to it as his signature move, that he does go in and try to do that to Daniel. Yet we didn't really get that in the film, or at least it's only very slightly sort of hinted at in the film, like with where his hands is on his face. So any thoughts on that?
I think like you said, it would have been cool for Hinks to have a thing. And if they made it more obvious, like if Daniel had almost come close to having his eyes gouged out or something, that would have been cool. Instead, we just get that one scene in the beginning, which is it definitely gets the scariness of Hinks across, I guess, but it kind of feels disconnected because it doesn't pay off later on in the film at all.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
Hopefully, if he comes back in the next one, hopefully we'll get a bit more. If he does,
yeah. If he does, that would be cool. I think from what I've been reading of people's reviews online, Batista's performance seems to be universal about the film. So I think if there's enough of a demand, they could consider that.
Yeah, it would be like Jaws coming back after the end of Spy Who Loved Me. Everyone wrote to them saying they wanted him. I think if there's enough people on social media going, "We love Hinks, then hopefully he'll come back as well.
Yeah, I can see that happening.
One thing I thought was pretty cool in that when they get on the train, there's you get a brief glimpse of Hinks, don't you, reading the newspaper, sitting in an adjacent carriage, and as they're walking to their little carriage with their luggage or whatever, you just saw this brief glimpse of him sitting there reading the newspaper, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, that would have been cool. It would have established his character as this, like, he's obviously a really threatening henchman, but at the same time he's just this guy with little rituals, and he likes to get his name in the newspaper and whatnot. Yeah, would have been kind of nice.
Yeah. So I suppose the next kind of part is where most of the this next section of the film is where most of the changes come, which is the whole kind of Blofeld base sequence now in the October versus December, and then obviously versus the actual film itself. There's quite a lot of huge differences, isn't there? I suppose the main one I noticed was how basically Q in the Austria scenes was actually captured by the goons, and he shows up in Blofeld's base as well as a fellow prisoner of Bond, doesn't he?
Yeah, so I guess in the October script, Q would have been a much bigger character. Because Q essentially, so he gets captured in Austria. I think there's a scene where he writes Spectre in the mirror, and, it's a little overdramatic, but that's all right. But yeah, obviously they ended up not doing that. But it's interesting because in the October script, Q gets captured, and it's actually Moneypenny back in London who does a lot of the searching about what Spectre is. Yeah. And in the October script, I think you guys know how in the film there's a scene in Rules where M tells Moneypenny and Q that there's nothing they can do anymore, right?
Yeah.
In the October script, I think that there's that same scene, but instead it's M tells Moneypenny to help him, help Bond. So it's like the opposite of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
But
that is interesting.
yeah, that is interesting. But I like what they ended up going with, because you guys touched on this in your M episode, but when M says that we can't help Bond anymore, it kind of it really shows that he's not afraid to to put his agents out there, even if it means he has to lose them in order to do the right thing. Like it's a real character moment, and I like that ends up happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose, like, in the different scripts, let's talk about the whole Q storyline first. So the idea was that the goons in Austria captured him. He ended up being a fellow prisoner with Bond, and they end up being put in this, like, what is it called? Like a
solar furnace.
A solar furnace. That's it. Yeah. It's
solar furnace, and then Blofeld gives electric shocks to Bond or something. Am I right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
So basically, in this scene, Q's taken up a lot of the screen time that would have been for Madeleine Swan, because Blofeld almost leaves Bond and Q to their death, so to speak, and he takes Madeleine Swan away in a helicopter, and they go off. So Bond and Q are left in this solar furnace sort of thing, where there's a giant mirror, which is quite Man of the Golden Gun-esque, that reflects the sunlight into this sort of room that kind of is meant to slowly cook Bond and Q, isn't it? So as an actual sort of torture room, it sounded really good, really effective, I think.
Yeah. I think that sounds, I mean, on one hand, what they ended up going with, the lobotomy torture, that's also quite effective in terms of, this is affecting Bond on the most basic level. But I think what, that scene, the solar furnace scene, that would have been probably more of a bigger spectacle to watch.
Yeah.
Just imagine the room slowly filling with, burning light or something like that.
Yeah.
That would be cool. Yeah.
And it singes his skin as well, doesn't it? So his skin actually burns from the heat of the sun, and that's a really good idea, I think.
Yeah.
Right. That was really interesting.
It was like that, wasn't it? In the sense that half of the room's in darkness where they are, and then the sunlight is gradually creeping across the floor until it starts touching them, and it literally burns their skin. Which is quite interesting. And obviously Q helps him escape and all that kind of stuff. And the way the base blows up was different as well, wasn't it? That was Q points out some, isn't it? So, didn't they angle the mirror to point onto a different building, and then that set off an explosion or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. And there's some nice line around there where Bond sort of says to Q, Q's just explained to Bond what he's going to do about angling the mirror, and Bond's like, okay, so what does that mean? What's going to happen? And Q's basically like, well, one of two things. One, it could just short circuit everything, and hopefully we'll get out. And Bond's like, okay. And what's the second thing? And Q's like, well, it's a little hard to explain, but, and then at that point, it sort of hits the thing, and it all sort of starts to blow up, doesn't it? Yeah. So it's quite a cool scene. I really like that, actually. I really like that sort of whole scene and that idea.
One more thing that I just remembered, in this Q and Bond escape scene, I think in the script, Q actually kills someone. He takes a gun, he shoots someone.
That's right.
And then Bond says, let me find the line. Bond says, sometimes the trigger has to be pulled, which is obviously a callback to Skyfall, which I thought would have been cool, because obviously in Skyfall they had that whole, not a debate, but a conversation about, is it still necessary to have agents in the field doing the stuff when you can just have a hacker at home, doing all the, and that would have been a nice callback to Skyfall, I think.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, that would.
obviously, it got cut out.
Yeah. So that's kind of like version 1 then. And then in the December one, there is, this sort of little bit, I guess, happens in both, where they actually sit down to dinner with Oberhauser, and basically Madeline says she doesn't want to eat dinner, and then the goons get a bit rough with her and stuff. And that's the sort of part where they talk about when they were kids and stuff, and there's a lot more backstory on that, and there's a whole conversation about how that basically Hans would sit in his bedroom all night on his own, and Franz would, and Hans and Bond would be playing cards using hazelnuts for chips, and he would listen to them through the wall, and it angered him. So Franz learned how to play the game on his own, and then took Bond on as kids. And there was this whole backstory with like a card game that they were playing as children. And then in the December script, they actually play that game again. And like, that's like one of their face-off moments, is they're sitting there playing cards, which I think, in terms of the backstory, I think there's an angle there that might have been nice to explore. But the whole sequence of them playing cards in the Tangiers Bay, in the Morocco base, wherever it is, just felt really fucking strange. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it felt strange because it feels like the exact same scene from Casino Royale, basically.
Yeah.
Bond and the villain facing off against some kind of poker game. It would have been interesting. I don't know if they could have. It is basically the 2 or 3 of them talking for what feels like several minutes. So I don't know if they would have been able to maintain the momentum. They ended up going with something, I think, which is a little more dramatic.
Yeah.
Torture, obviously, but also before that, when you have Bond and Madeline watching that video, I think that's a bit more dramatic and a bit more effective than just the 3 of them having dinner.
Yeah.
I did like in terms of that story. What I really did like, I don't think you could have seen them play it out, but when Blofeld's describing it, what I did like is in the fact that so they're playing together, and Blofeld's got a good hand, and he knows he's going to win, so he's putting in all his hazelnuts, whatever they were using to bet, and basically Bond then sort of sees him. And he even puts his watch given to him by his dead dad into the pot, sort of thing. And suddenly Blofeld's like, "Oh, hang on a minute. Maybe he must have. If he's putting in his dad's watch, he's got to have a better hand than me." Blofeld had a flush, I think, and so in the end he folded his cards. And when Bond turned over his cards, all he had was like a pair or like a pair of 3s or something. And so at that point, Blofeld was like so sort of angry, and like he'd experienced Bond's bluffing at first hand, and then it kind of then came back later on in the film how he'd always got that in the back of his mind. And although they didn't use it, I still quite like that link and that idea of them being together. So would you prefer, because obviously we find out in the film they stay together as not foster brothers, but it kind of like that. Do you think we should have had more? If we had had more backstory, that would have strengthened that, and people would have been happier to accept that idea? Or do you think they should have kept it at the level they did?
I think a little more backstory would have been useful. We already talked about the whole Foreign Legion thing earlier with Mr. White. I think if they'd kept that, and then if they'd put in this, what you just talked about, Chris, with the whole Bond basically besting Oberhauser at this game, I think that would have established the motivation a bit better. In the actual movie, in the movie, we just kind of, Christoph Waltz just kind of tells us that happened. If we'd seen them interact and tell that story again, I think that would have conveyed it a bit better.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do want to mention one thing we missed. In the train sequence between Bond and Madeline, there's a whole conversation that got cut out where Madeline essentially asks them, "Have you ever been in love before?" and stuff like that, and they kind of talk about Vesper.
That's right.
What did you guys think about that?
Yeah, she says, "Have you ever been in love before?" And he says, "Once." And then she says, "What happened?" And he's like, "She died." And that immediately made me think of License to Kill, when Della makes the joke about getting married to Bond, and Felix is like, "No." Yeah, I kind of like that. Like we kind of said, didn't we, Chris, talking about that sequence, that like for the first time you had a psychologist sitting across from Bond in a setting where you could have had some real reveal about Bond's inner psyche and really use that scene to kind of delve into that. And we didn't really get that all much. It was just a bit of light flirting. So I do think that they could have dug a little bit deeper on that. And I guess that's possibly what they were thinking then if she was asking that, because she is kind of almost psychoanalyzing him a little bit in some of that script, isn't she?
And I think doing that would strengthen their relationship as well, because some people are saying there's not enough between them. But by her sort of psychoanalyzing Bond and Bond realizing what she's trying to do, there's almost like an extra layer there between their relationship. And I think that would have added something if we had a bit more of that, definitely.
Yeah, I think their relationship needed, in Casino Royale we got a scene like the shower scene or something where we really see their vulnerability, their emotions. We didn't really get that in Spectre, and I think that a conversation like that between the two of them would have been good to establish the connection that they have, or that we're supposed to believe that they have.
Absolutely. Yeah. So getting back to the whole Tangiers thing, or the Blofeld base thing, in the December script, there's no torture scene, is there? So basically how that pays off is they have that conversation, the card game, and Bond once again gives Blofeld his watch as Oberhauser, as he's called, or Ernest Serban, as he is in the script. And he gives him the watch as his as his stake in the game, and sets the timer, and then at the last second he lifts up the table and then the blast goes off, and Blofeld still gets his scar from that, but it's actually Bond directly doing that rather than Madeline throwing it, which I thought was quite an interesting little take.
Yeah, so there's no torture scene. One of the most pivotal things about that scene is whether or not Bond can recognize Madeline, and she says, I love you and all that. So we don't get any of that. It's just kind of Bond just throws the watch, and then there's a huge action sequence.
Yeah.
I wonder if they put that in, the whole Madeline, I love you, I'd recognize you anywhere kind of thing. I wonder if they put that in instead of the earlier train conversation to kind of replace that. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
because I haven't actually read the December script yet. So when they're playing, are they still playing for hazelnuts? And when Bond tips the table, do loads of hazelnuts blast into Blofeld's face like Zal's diamonds?
I don't think that's there, but that would be pretty funny if that happened.
Yeah, that would be great.
Basically, what happens is the story that you were talking about. They kind of retell that story as they're playing poker, puts it in the pot to kind of bookend that earlier story, and then that's when it blows up, and you know the rest.
Yeah.
Okay. Where's Madeline in relation to when that's going on with Blofeld and Bond?
I think she's just kind of sitting there. Am I right?
Yeah, I think so. I think she's just sitting there watching. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
But, cool. So I guess those are that sequence there in the creative base. That's like the biggest differences, isn't it? In from script to script kind of thing. And then sort of moving towards like the climax of the film, the showdown's always at the MI6, the blown out MI6 building. But what happens here is it just happens in some really different ways. So there's this little plot point where Bond says something about like this file that he has in storage at the MI6 building that can incriminate Blofeld and bring down the whole operation. And we meet Irma Bunt, who was in the script at one point, who's with Blofeld, and they head back to MI6 together to try and search out this file. And then obviously they kind of, and then at one point she takes Madeline hostage, and then there's this big sort of fight between Bond and Irma Bunt, and that just, I don't know, you weren't a fan of that one at all, were you, Chris? It just felt a bit odd, that whole sequence.
It was, the whole thing of there just being an incriminating file, I mean, come on, what's that about?
It sounds a bit like in Skyfall when they have the hard drive at the beginning.
Yeah.
I don't, it's just kind of why would that be there? Like, why would you have that?
Yeah.
But
bit strange. But it was interesting for sure to have Irma there, and I don't know if she's ever referred to as Irma Bunt or just Irma. Is she referred to as Irma Bunt?
I think it was just Irma in the script, but I assumed it was Irma Bunt. Yeah.
So that could be like a future character, perhaps. You never know.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that? Because this climax sequence in MI6 was very different from script. Well, I say very different. It was more or less what we got, but with some different details in there. So what are your thoughts on that whole MI6 sequence with the different versions?
Well, one thing I thought was interesting is in the October script, which you guys both read, there's a whole scene where C kind of presents the Nine Eyes program to a press conference. Blofeld comes and kind of he starts the countdown or something.
Yeah.
Which is totally gone. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, he was brought in as the benefactor, wasn't he? And it was he was like the money man, and he's literally standing there when the presentation's going on and all that kind of business. I didn't like that at all. I was like, I didn't feel like Blofeld should be seen in public at all, really. You know, I thought that was a bit odd.
Yeah, and likewise, I think if that had happened, I can't see M standing up in front of everyone going, oh, this man's really bad. And he's like the head of MI6 putting himself in front of everyone. I mean, that just wouldn't have happened. Yeah. What I do think they should have done is perhaps still had the idea of all these people in the building and a party going on, and you see C with them, but then he gets a phone call saying, you know, something's going down, and then he goes from the busy party downstairs up to his office where it's quiet, and then that's where we get the MQC scene. I think that would have worked better if we'd had that. But
that would have been pretty cool. Also, one thing in the December script is instead of M killing C, it's Bond. So it's Bond in his office, and they basically redo the pre-title sequence of Casino Royale. Obviously, they have their little conversation, and he holds up the gun, and there's no bullets. But so it's interesting. I think I like that they changed to M because A, it gives M a bit more to do, and B, it's just a great character moment. It just establishes a little bit for the whole movie. So to have him kill C is a nice way to bring them both on the same page.
Yeah, that was odd. Because Bond is the one that delivers the whole "we know what C stands for" line and all that kind of business. And it is more or less the same scene, but just Bond instead. And Bond ends up shooting him in the head, doesn't he? Like it's like one bullet to the brain kind of thing, and that's C's kind of comeuppance. But I definitely thought it worked better with them, without a shadow of a doubt. That was an odd choice. But then So with the face off during the MI6 thing, that was, if I remember right, that was more or less the same as what we got. We still had the scene with Blofeld behind the bulletproof glass, revealing the scar, walking through with the faces up on the target range and all that kind of stuff. And then still the jump down into the net was there. But the main difference was Irma Bunt. The showdown wasn't just Madeline kind of tied up. It was like Irma Bunt was almost using Madeline as like a human shield, and Bond had to get up there, and there was some fisticuffs and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then in the December script, I remember it was more or less what we get in the film, except Madeline's just like chained up to a random radiator in M's office, and Blofeld says what you were saying, Chris. He basically hints that that's where she is, that she's in M's office, and he has to run up there, which I feel always works better, because not telling Bond where she is in that short space of time is a bit of a stretch. Whereas if he knew to run up there, then that's a bit more believable, I think.
I wasn't it in the October draft, wasn't it Bond who arrived in a helicopter as well? And he landed the helicopter on the MI6 building. So it wasn't Blofeld, it was actually Bond that had the helicopter and landed on the MI6 building, which was a bit odd, I thought.
I think you're right. I think Bond do your aviation license or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
I think we're supposed to infer that that's how he gets the helicopter. What I think was interesting was in the October script, Irma doesn't really appear until we get to Blofeld's base. It's almost like she doesn't appear until Hank dies, and I feel like that it would have seemed a bit of a too late of a character to be introduced.
Yeah,
I think. So I'm glad that they didn't go with that. Yeah, if they're gonna do Irma, they should probably make her a proper henchman or henchwoman, and give her a bit more to do.
And maybe Hinks falls in love with Irma at the end of the next one, and they have this amazing scene. But one point of note, which did raise an eyebrow, is that Irma was a little bit touchy-feely with Madeline, wasn't she? There was mentioned in the script that she keeps like eyeing her up and down and stuff, and she wanted a piece of swan action, which I thought was fun.
She's
always
only
welcome.
human.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah. Now the other sort of main sort of talking point, I guess, is like the very end of the film. Well, not the very end. We're going to talk about that in a minute, Linda. So I'm very excited about it. But the takedown of Blofeld on the bridge. So the shooting down of the helicopters, more or less the same. But then actually when Bond gets to the bridge, Blofeld's crawling out of the helicopter. Once we get to that point, we get some key differences from script to script. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. So in the October script, Blofeld actually gets out okay, gets out of MI6 okay, and he's kind of driving along, and then suddenly cars blockade him, and then he comes out, and there's a whole thing. And then in the December script, it's basically the same as the movie. So his helicopter gets shot down, and he's kind of crawling on the road. But in both scripts, he has quite a long monologue at the end, where he talks about, it's a bit similar to what Silva says at the end of Skyfall. Basically, he's taunting Bond to kill him and do stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we don't get any of that in the movie. It's just Blofeld. I think he just says, do it, and Bond does the whole looking to both sides thing.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about that? Would you have preferred him to say a bit more as he's kind of trapped?
Well, do you know what? It does strike me as a bit funny in the finished film that Blofeld is a bit quiet, and there are some shots of him just sort of. There's like that one shot of him where he's just sort of like looking around, and like when M says to him, like, you're being detained or whatever, he just sort of looks down, and I feel like there was definitely room for something else to happen there. It just feels like sort of dead time, really. But in one of the scripts, I think it's December, he's literally like, he does the Arnold Schwarzenegger thing of like, do it, kill me, do it now, kind of thing. I was like, no, let's not have that. Let's not have that at all. But yeah, so there's that going on. And my argument is we at this early stage, we shouldn't see Blofeld in any position where he has to struggle. He should be still, even when he's caught, the cool, calm and collected sort of mastermind that he's unflappable kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think about that, Chris?
Well, yeah, when I read the October one and he shot him, or did he shoot him in the October one, or was that just
in October?
mentioned?
I think he kills him, doesn't he?
He did. Yeah. So he actually shoots Blofeld, and when I read that, I was like,
I don't think he kills him. I don't think he kills him. He maims him though. Like he does shoot him, but I think it's like he doesn't die.
Right, okay. I assumed he died, but any which way, yeah, I suppose because is it the December or the October one where Bond gets shot on the shoulder, but he shoots Blofeld 2 or 3 times?
That's December. Yeah, there's a bit where he comes running up the stairs. He shoots Blofeld like 3 times. Yeah, he still survives. And then there's a bit of dialogue, and Blofeld has like a little Derringer pistol, like a one-shotter, and shoots Bond in the shoulder. And but then that still ends the same. But instead of M coming up and saying you're being detained from Her Majesty's service or whatever, Bond delivers that line, and then he walks off with Madeleine. So yeah, there was some definite different decisions made on that bridge. Any thoughts on that, Linda?
Like I said, like I agree with what you said earlier. What we ended up getting in the finished film is it feels a little disjointed.
Yeah.
The actual showdown on that bridge should have been, a really emotional charged moment, like the whole scene in Skyfall with Silva. But instead, it's just kind of it's almost like the focus is not on Blofeld, but on Bond's choice between the job and Madeleine, I guess.
Yeah.
So it just feels a bit weird. It would have been cool to see them do one of the things that they considered in these scripts.
He does kill Blofeld at the end of the October script. He shoots him in the forehead. Yeah, 1 bullet and he's dead. Yeah, and that was like a bit shocking when I read it, just because I thought, well, you spent all this, like I was saying to Tom previously, you've got 50 years worth of legal battles. You finally got this character back. You don't want to kill him in the first film, do you? So yeah, I was a bit shocked when I read that. How could you even consider killing Blofeld as well? Very strange, I thought.
They could still bring him back. I mean, was it Renard? He got shot in the head too, and
That's a good point.
They made up something. They made up something about how he survived. So you could still have to about that.
Yeah, that's very true.
I agree. He's definitely more of a multi-film villain.
Without doubt, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Right. This is the big boy, right? This is the big boy. To anybody who hasn't read any of the leaked scripts, I was pleasantly reading through this. Almost like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, yeah, they did that a bit different. This is nice. Oh, I'm glad they got rid of that. Blah, 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 blah. Then I get to the last page. Not even the last page. I get to the last line. And I have what can only be described as some kind of seizure. Like I absolutely went apeshit. Now, let me just bring it up because I have to get it. I have to get it exactly as it's written, because to me, this is incredible stuff. Right. So bear with me 1 second. Link script.
And this line is the same for both scripts, I should add.
Is it? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Let me zoom in. So, okay, do you want to be Madeline, Linda, and I'll be Bond?
Okay.
Are you doing October or December?
I've got December.
I'm doing October. Oh, you got December? Okay. Give me 1 second. All right. Okay. Yeah, I got it.
Okay, so we're in the bit where they're in the DB5.
I'll do the action.
All right, go on then.
Okay. So, exterior, London street, dawn. A series of close-ups. A hand turns the key in the ignition. A rev counter bursts to life. An engine throbs. A clutch is depressed. A gear stick is slammed forward. Now we see Bond in the front seat. He turns and looks. Madeline in the passenger seat. She smiles back.
Where will we go, James?
I have a few ideas. After all, we have all the time in the world.
Oh, Bond theme kicks in.
I mean, come on. What's going on there?
So, now, I think even I've talked to many people who've seen this movie, and there are quite a few people who still thought, even without this line, they still thought this movie was leading up to a kind of On Her Majesty's Secret Service kind of ending.
Yeah.
But that line would have basically made it set in stone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you have liked to have kept it in there, Linda?
I don't know. It would have been crazy to see the reaction to that in the audience.
Do you know what? I'm firmly in the ballpark of like, keep that line in, man. Can you imagine sitting in the Albert Hall that night, Chris, and then that was the last line of the film? We would have the whole place would have erupted, you know?
Yeah, that would have been special.
So it begs to the idea that it seems like, because we're getting the DB5 driving off into the sunset at the end of this film, that they're reusing that idea that they've toyed with at the end of Majesty's, where they were going to drive off from the wedding and have the happy ending, and then the beginning of Diamonds was going to be the death of Tracy. So it suggests that that's what we're going to get in Bond 25, is the death of Madeline at the beginning of the film, and then basically a new version of what Diamonds would have been with George. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, if they'd cut the line, I would have been, yeah, that's 100% what they're going to do, because that's not in there, and we're still not sure, I guess, whether or not Madeline Swan's going to return in the next movie.
Yeah.
If they had kept the line, I would have been like, yes, that's definitely where they're going. Yeah. They're definitely going to kill her in the next movie and have that kind of situation. But because they cut the line, I'm not sure. I also think, for me, I think the relationship between them wasn't that convincing. So I still have a little trouble being persuaded that this is the woman Bond would basically give it up all for.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not sure. What do you guys think? Would you guys, if they announced, in a couple months, Léa Seydoux is returning for Bond 25, what do you guys think?
I will allow you to speak first, Chris, because I'm going to talk for half an hour otherwise.
Personally, I agree with you, Linda, in that I don't feel their relationship is at a stage where, if, for instance, she was killed off early on in Bond 25, I wouldn't feel the equivalent of if Vesper had survived Casino and then was killed off in Quantum. I think there needs to be a whole other film. If Madeline comes back, I want to see her survive Bond 25 and go into Bond 26 and then perhaps get bumped off then. I don't think there's not enough in there for me between the two of them to warrant her being killed off, at least at the start of the film. Maybe at the end, if we see throughout Bond 25 there's more of a relationship between them, then yeah, go for it. But definitely not at the start. If it happens at the start, I will be a bit disappointed, I think.
You know what, though? I think there's one way you could solve that really easily, is by the passage of time. And if you started Bond 25 like they did with Quantum 10 minutes after the events of this one, then yeah, I'd agree with you 100%. But if it's literally like 2-3 years later and they're still together and they're living a happy settled life or something, then I feel like you could start the film with her getting bumped off and taking it from there. So I reckon what we're getting here is we're getting the whole Blofeld trilogy from Fleming done in a slightly different way. So this is the equivalent of Thunderball. The next one will be like a Majesty's Diamonds Are Forever kind of hybrid. And then the next one will be like the You Only Live Twice story, where Blofeld finally gets his comeuppance. We'll get the whole Garden of Death thing and all that kind of stuff. So that the concept of that excites me beyond belief. And I feel like that would be the perfect amount of time. Daniel does 2 more, then he bows out, and then we get the next guy. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I'd like that. There's so much in You Only Live Twice that I would love that hasn't been put on screen that I would love to see.
Yeah.
You mentioned, the Garden of Death and all that. I think that the only thing that concerns me would be if they do the whole Bond's wife dies and he has to get revenge for her. My only concern would be would it feel too similar to Quantum of Solace? Because we've already had that arc play out with Daniel Craig's Bond.
Yeah.
Once. And I don't know if seeing it again would sap it of some of its power.
It's a good point. It's a good point. I think in a way, I feel like, yeah, I do get that. And I think the way you would do it is to almost look at it from a different angle, in the sense that, okay, the first time he ever lost somebody was Vesper in Casino. He's kind of got over that now. He's like the cool dude that we've always known him to be. And then that's almost like with what happens in this film, seeing the videotape and stuff and him just putting it down and, even saying the bitch is dead at the end of Casino and all that kind of stuff is like closure on Vesper. And then it's like he's gone on that journey and then he's like, do you know what? It's time to settle down. And instead of it just being that same story again, it's the fact that Bond can never settle down this time because she ends up dead again. And instead of it being, oh, I've lost somebody I love, it's like, well, this has happened twice now. This is a life I just can't live. I can't have anybody close to me because they all end up dead. And I have to do, it's like the old school Incredible Hulk series when he just walked off into the sunset on his own at the end of every episode, because whenever he'd get angry, he'd turn green and massive and beat everybody up. And it's the same sort of idea, I think. And it would be, you look at it through that lens rather than just losing somebody he loves. It's like, it's more of a decision because it's not just losing somebody he loves, it's his whole life and a way of life he can never have, and looking at it that from that angle rather than that. Any thoughts on that?
Sure, I think it would be interesting, and the way you put that, if they did do something like that, it would really give Daniel's last film, I guess, a sense of finality,
Yeah.
Which would be cool. Yeah.
Because I think you can't ever have Bond walk off into the sunset. Like if this was his last film, that ending would be really silly because Bond can't walk off into the sunset arm in arm with his missus and be happy ever after. That's just not what it is. He's got to like walk off into the darkness, back into the shadows, because that's the life he has to lead. What are your thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, well, this is the one chance I've got to flip that, and I think they're allowed to do that for one film. Not they're allowed, but I think it's possible to do that for one film, and then after that, it'd have to go return back to, he can't stay with anyone. But if they do, I mean, Linda, what would you think if we don't see Madeline at all in the next film? Would you think that's okay, or do you think she has to be in the next one?
I think I wouldn't mind, because to be honest, I wasn't a big fan of the character to begin with. But the way they set her up in Spectre, they gave her character and her relationship to Bond so much importance that it would, if they just totally don't mention her in the next film, it would seem weird. So I think if they don't want to bring her back from the next film, they should at least try to explain that somehow. Don't just leave us, in the dark wondering what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they've set her relationship. They set up her relationship with Bond to be a bit different than the regular Bond girl relationship.
Yeah.
You don't, at the end of the film, you get the sense that she changed his character almost, and you don't really, when Bond and Christmas Jones end up together at the end of The World Is Not Enough, you don't get the sense that she's going to change him. So if they don't bring her back for the next movie, they're going to have to explain that somehow, I think, or it won't feel right.
Well, what if they bring back Christmas next time round? How about that? That'll be interesting. Can you imagine?
That'll be very controversial.
You imagine Daniel and Denise Richards acting opposite each other? It just would not work on any level, would it? Good God. Disgraceful.
No.
So that's basically the movie summed up then. I suppose the biggest hit for me is that final line of the script. We have all the time in the world was just like, I just had complete chills when I read that. It was like, whoa, which tells me at some point whether the fact that they've removed it changes things or not, but at some point they were thinking of that whole Majesty's kind of angle for the next film. At least that must have crossed their mind. But the fact that they've removed it, maybe they've changed their mind on that. I don't know. So I guess that's open. But what do you think then? All in all, with the different versions of the leaked scripts, Linda, what do you think? Do you think we've ended up with the better film for the changes, or do you think there were some things that they should have kept in?
I think on the whole, I'm quite happy with what they ended up going with. There's just a few things, mainly to do with backstory of Blofeld and Fight, and maybe a little bit more of development between Bond and Madeline that I would have liked. I get why they didn't put that in there, because otherwise we'd have like a 4-hour movie, I guess. But I think if they put that in there, a lot of the complaints we've been hearing about, the story being disjointed and the characters being underwritten, that would have solved a lot of those.
Yeah.
Sometimes it only would have taken one or two little lines here and there, which would have, cemented over a lot of gaps, perhaps, that some people have. For sure.
Yeah, especially that thing about bankrolling silver. That's all that it needed to say, And you could have put that in that sort of control room scene when he explains. He says, silver, it was all me. Yeah. He could have just said, I bankrolled silver. It was all me. That would have just made so much more sense. Yeah. Which is a shame. But generally speaking about the film, then, Linda, what were your thoughts? Like, are you a big time Spectre lover? Somewhere in the middle? What's your feelings?
I think I'm somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
It was entertaining. I should say I've seen it 3 times now. I saw it twice when it opened, like the weekend it opened here, and then I saw it another time just last week.
Yeah.
And I did it. I think it's quite enjoyable. I think it's hard to say. I think I might have enjoyed this one more than Skyfall, just in terms of the experience of it.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of some of the characters, I didn't get Madeline and Bond. I didn't get that relationship. I felt like the Undersea and Lucia, those characters, and I think they didn't really end up paying off as well as they could have.
Yeah.
And I think I guess this ties back to the earlier conversation we had. Knowing what I knew from the leaked script, I expected them to do a little more with Blofeld that I feel like they didn't really explore.
Yeah.
So I think that's why those 3 things are kind of why I'm a little bit in the middle about this film. I'm not negative on it.
Yeah.
I'd still recommend everyone see it. But for me, it doesn't really come close to Casino Royale or From Russia with Love. And all those kind of.
So what was your first viewing experience? Where did you go, and was there a good atmosphere and everything?
Oh, it was good. So it opened on a Friday, but normally they have screenings on the Thursday night, which are like the first movies. So I went to that. It was about a theater. It was in a theater and about an hour away from where I live. Packed house. I went there an hour early, and already people lining up, and it felt really good. Yeah.
Huh. Nice.
Overall, I think it was a good experience, but I got the sense people left the theater a little not unhappy, but not as pumped as they could have been. I remember leaving the theater after Casino Royale. People were just full energy.
Yeah.
Being like, this
do you think that was due
yeah.
to them being confused?
I think so. The ending could have been. Now, see, that's where maybe if they had put in that "we have all the time in the world" line, I don't know if that would have changed the way the film. Like, would that have changed the way the audience leaves the film? Would that have given them a bit more?
I guess it depends if they were hardcore fans or not. I guess the casual moviegoer, that wouldn't mean anything to them, would it? It would be only people like us that would have been like, "What the fuck?" After that. But there you go. So if you narrowed it down, then what would you say is like your favourite part of the film?
I liked the pre-title sequence. I really liked that whole 10-minute part. I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing about it, but obviously that first continuous take was really great. But just the overall, the kind of energy and the colorfulness of that sequence was really great to watch.
Yeah.
On a more technical scale. I liked Hinks. I think I'm really hoping they bring back Hinks because I think he was. I've always wondered why the Craig era needs more henchmen, and I'm glad that they finally got one now.
Yeah.
So hopefully they'll bring back him or a character like that in the next film. And I think actually, a lot of people have been saying this film wasn't as on a cinematography level, wasn't as impressive as Skyfall, but I actually thought there were a lot of shots that looked really great.
Yeah.
There's quite a few shots of the train going through the desert.
Yeah,
that's when I noticed where the sun is just setting over the horizon.
Yeah.
I thought that was a beautiful shot. That one, yeah.
Yeah. But it was good. It was good. I just think with the Craig era, they've set such a high bar with things like Casino Royale that it's going to be hard for them to top that or even equal that.
Yeah.
So I'm just glad we got a good, entertaining film, and we got Blofeld back, and we got all of those things back. I'm pretty happy with that.
Absolutely.
So you obviously mentioned one or two things that you would change potentially, but how does Spectre rank with you in terms of the four Daniels? Casino sounds like it's probably your favourite. How do the other three go?
I think I might. Now I know I said earlier I enjoyed this one more than Skyfall, but I think I might put Skyfall just ahead of this one. So it would go Casino, Skyfall, Spectre, and Quantum of Solace. That's not a dig on Spectre. It's just I think Skyfall had the pace of the film was a bit more was a bit quicker. Like that film just moved. Whenever Bond gets a little bit more personal, and I think Skyfall did that a bit better. Yeah. So I'd put it third for now.
Very nice.
In terms of where it might rank with all the films, I think I'm gonna have to watch it a few more times because I don't feel comfortable ranking it just yet.
It's always difficult, isn't it? Once you've just seen it and it's fresh, you need to give it a good few months at least, and even then, sometimes it changes after a year or two, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So go on then, just to finish up, what do you personally want to see from Bond 25? Do you want to see the whole, Blofeld trilogy thing? Do you want to see because a lot of people are calling for, the standard Bond thing where some completely non-personal mission comes up and then Bond gets sent out by him to go and do that mission, like The Man with the Golden Gun is a perfect example of that. What do you want to see? The perfect Bond 25 to you, what would that be?
Well, I think a standalone film would be great. I don't think just because of the way Spectre ended, I don't think they can do that.
Yeah.
They're gonna have to kind of tie up some of those loose ends. I agree with what Chris said earlier. If they do the "You Only Live Twice" arc, that would be great. But we're gonna need a little bit more development with Bond and Madeline before I can believe that this is someone he would go and get revenge on.
Yeah.
So I think we'll need a couple more films of this story arc that they've built up.
I guess that would be the interesting thing is if, like you say, Chris, if she does come back for 25 and maybe she doesn't die in 25 but dies at the beginning of 26, that would be the first time we've ever had anything like that in the Bond series. So that would perhaps be interesting.
That's what I'm hoping for. I'd much prefer to do it that way. I think it needs another film to cement their relationship, and it's never happened before. We've never had someone survive, come back and survive, and then I think that'd definitely be the way to go for me. Either comes back for 25 and we see a lot more, and perhaps she dies at the end, or finishes on a high and then she dies at the start of 26 maybe, if that happens. But it's all crazy, isn't it? All speculation. So Linda, out of the characters that we saw in Spectre, obviously aside from the MI6 crew and Bond, who would you like to see come back for Bond 25?
Well, I said it already. I like what they did with Hinks. I'm hoping he comes back, but I just think I've seen a lot of Christoph Waltz's other work, and I know he's a great actor. He's got a lot of potential. So I'm really hoping if/when they bring him back for Bond 25 or 26, he's a little bit more menacing, maybe, or we see more of we see more concrete examples of how Spectre controls the world, essentially. I really want them to do a little more of that with Blofeld.
Yeah.
But we'll have to see. I'm not sure because obviously in the past we've never had the same actor play Blofeld twice, so I don't really know if they'll bring him back. But I do hope they bring him back because I think Christoph Waltz was one of the big selling points of this film. A lot of people I know went to see it because of Christoph Waltz. So bringing him back would be really great.
Nice. Yeah,
Cool.
I'm in agreement with that. I want to see some more Christoph for sure. Brilliant stuff. Well, thanks for coming on to the show, Linda. It was illuminating to go through the script there, and I think you play a wonderful Madeline Swan.
Well, we'll see about that.
That's the part where you say I make an amazing Bond.
It didn't come back that way.
Oh gosh. So yeah. But yeah, I'm excited. Now that Spectre's over, I'm excited for the whole build up to Bond 25. I can't wait to see what kind of news tidbits we got, all the casting, all the story details. I can't wait for that, and I'll try to report on that.
Beautiful.
Good stuff. So if you have a chance to read a leaked script of Bond 25, are you going to take that chance again?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't think it's going to happen. I honestly think what we had with this Sony leak is probably a once in a several decade long opportunity. I don't know. I might not, just because now that I know, I do want to keep some bits surprised, you know.
Yeah.
And I do want to compare. It would be cool to compare. Maybe for Bond 25, I'll try and go in blind like you did, Chris, and compare whether or not I like a film better if I don't know anything about it, or if I like it better knowing almost everything about it.
Yeah.
It would be cool.
And I think there's still, if they wanted to, there's one or two scenes and ideas they could probably mine from the leaked scripts to use in future Bonds. That solar furnace scene being one of them, I think that is great. I think that's brilliant. I think there are definitely one or two ideas they had which were worth remembering for future, because we've seen that in other Bond films. You know, like the Aquastar jet was going to be in Moonraker and it was in Octopussy. The helicopter with the spinning blades was going to be in Goldeneye and it was in World Is Not Enough. So they always have these ideas that they then bring back. So yeah, there is a couple of good things in those scripts.
Do you know what? You mentioning the solar furnace again just brings back a memory of in the October script, Moneypenny is much more featured in the climax, isn't she? And she's literally running around with a gun and she shoots like there's some boats with Blofeld's heavies in, and she shoots and there's this huge explosion, and there's this line that she says to Bond at the end of like, "See, I'm not such a bad shot after all, am I?" And they link that back to Skyfall, which was interesting. But I was like, when I read that, I was like, I don't want to see Moneypenny that involved on that sort of level. But yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it, to see the different ideas that came and went, and like the track of what they were thinking, and then what they ended up changing and keeping, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, here's a question. If for some reason this ends up being Daniel's last film, and they bring in someone new, would you want the new Bond to continue with this Madeline Swan, Blofeld, etc. storyline, or would you just want a completely different story because it's a new Bond?
That is a good one. I think it would just feel a bit weird if they did that. I think all the core MI6 crew notwithstanding, I think having Madeline there would just feel a bit unusual. I don't know. What do you reckon, Chris?
I would be more than happy for someone else to come in and still play the Blofeld angle, but then you could almost have him in the background and have, like we mentioned before, like a number 2 or number 3 on the new actor's first Bond film, and then maybe have Blofeld come back a bit more into the next one. In terms of seeing Madeline Swan, I really wouldn't want to. I'd say Danny Boy's won, the end of the film, gone off hand in hand. They're off doing their own relationship. That's fine. If another Bond came in, another actor, I wouldn't. I think the whole Madeline Swan thing just wouldn't work. But I think Blofeld would still be okay to use again. But I want Daniel back.
What do you think, Linda? What's your thoughts on that?
I would like Daniel back too, but you guys, I'm sure you guys know he's been talking a lot about leaving. I I think before Spectre, it was rumored he wouldn't come back unless Mendez come back. So if that, if that's his criteria for coming back, we don't know if that's going to work out. Like I said before, I think he should come back off this arc so that so that we're not left hanging and wondering what could have happened with these characters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool stuff. All right. Well, this is officially the longest episode of the 30 Days of Spectre by quite a long way. We've waffled on for nearly an hour and a half. So an extra treat for the JBR family today.
It's been a lot of fun, Linda, and cheers for coming on and speaking about both the scripts. And let's hope we get some of that good juicy stuff for Bond 25 as well. Hopefully.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to all the news coming.
Cool. Good stuff. All right then, Linda. Thanks again for your time. We'll speak to you again soon, no doubt.
Yeah. And cheers for keeping Station C going as well.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
So that was very interesting, wasn't it?
It was incredibly. Like, I hadn't read the December script. I think you'd mentioned one or two things, but it's just funny, isn't it? How the details, the process they had gone through and everything like that. And I still think there are some things that I've read that I would have liked to have seen in the film.
Yeah.
Definitely some things they made a huge improvement on. But there are some things I thought, wow, there are certain lines which I just thought, ooh, that would have really worked. Especially that whole tying things up with Silver and all that sort of stuff. Just those little nuggets would have helped immensely, I think. But there were also... Oh, sorry.
Do you know what? Yeah, no, that thing of like, we've often said, just that one line, just that one shot would have tied that in and given the people who aren't fans just that little thing they need. Like the line about Blofeld says, about bankrolling Silver, like that's all it needed to be. Just saying, Le Chiffre, Silver, it was all me, or whatever it was he says, like that doesn't. Le Chiffre you can believe because he was tied into the organization. Green you can believe because he was tied into Quantum, and that all makes sense. Silver sort of stood on his own. So you needed a touch more information about Silver to get to kind of get it through. Now, which actually brings a thought to my mind, man. Can you imagine if you would have to rewind a few years, but can you imagine that Rome Spectre meeting with Le Chiffre sat at that table, with Silver sat at that table, and Dominic Green sat at that table? Wouldn't that be cool to see Mads Mikkelsen sitting there getting his orders? Do you know what I mean? How cool would that be?
That would be pretty rad. That would be pretty bloody amazing, actually. I mean, that would be awesome. There's another line where he mentioned something like, Silver was his computer
that's
hacker or
right.
something.
He says Le
Chiffre was a banker.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Silver was his computer hacker. Green was, what was Green again? PR or so, I don't know.
I can't. Damn it, that's annoying me now. Yeah.
And obviously, who is now his new surveillance expert, and it's obviously C.
Yeah.
And that was another. If he just had that line, that sort of paragraph, and that line about Silver, Bankroll Silver, perfect.
Yeah, it was like C's head of intelligence, Silver is the IT guy, Le Chiffre is the banker, the money guy.
Yeah.
Whatever Dominic Green was, I can't remember, but just little hints like that would have been lovely. Absolutely. Yeah. But interesting to see, isn't it, how the bones of the movie is all there from sort of scene to scene, location to location. It's all there, but it's just how those things went down is what changed from script to script. Obviously, notable one is Q being taken and being a prisoner alongside that kind of desert furnace oven thing, whatever that was.
Did you like that idea?
Yeah, I did. I think that was like, again, a classic Bondian. It's like the dipping him into some sharks. Do you know what I mean? Let's put him on the dipping mechanism. It's like that, but it wasn't just. It made sense. Do you know what I mean? It was like it was something that's like something you could do for real to somebody. So it makes sense.
I just love the image of him being sort of cooked alive, almost being singed, like see his skin like almost burning and being cooked in front of his eyes. That's a pretty powerful bloody They've got to bring that back, that solar furnace idea.
Well, there you go.
If
There's been numerous cases of them coming up with an idea that they've then used years later in a future film.
Yeah.
Xenionotop being a perfect example of that, with crushing of the thighs first pops up in Living Daylights, doesn't it? So there you go.
Good stuff.
Good stuff. So I guess that about rounds out to today's episode. Thanks for going out to Linda Zoo all the way over there in Station C for her thoughts on the scripts and all that kind of stuff. It was fun having her on again. Yeah, so before we go, make sure you come and join us on the social medias. Follow us on the Twitters, like us on the Facebooks, leave us your 90-second Spectre review on the old voicemail machine over on jamesbondradio.com. And obviously, if you want to donate to the JBR cause, then there's the link over there on jamesbondradio.com. Because Chris needs a new pair of shoes, and he's still wearing his flip-flops with holes in. So there we go. Good stuff. So thank you for tuning in. We will be back tomorrow on the final leg of the 30 Days of Spectre. We're on the final week of 30 Days of Spectre. So make sure you don't miss an episode, because we'll be gone soon. And then maybe we should do that. Happen? We should end it, Chris, ambiguous, like they end Spectre, and be like,
you mean walk off into the sunset holding hands? Or the moon set?
We can do that. The moon set. We can do that, and we'll be like, oh, we're just leaving. We've gone, or something like that, and then people will be speculating. They'll be like, well, are they going to come back and do another episode? I don't know. And then we can string them along in the press, and then come back for one more.
In the press.
Something like that, in the press. Yeah. We've been in the newspaper once. Now we're allowed to say things like that. Anyway, okay, cool. Good stuff. Until tomorrow, I've been Tom Sears.
I've been Chris Wright.
Oh, we did there. And James Bond Radio will return with another edition of the 30 Days of Spectre tomorrow morning. We'll see you then.
See you then, everyone. Bye.